Millionaire is betrayed and humiliated by his wife, who abandoned him after a tragic accident. But what he did next? Hello, welcome, enjoy, subscribe, and activate notifications. A faint drizzle misted the city as Daniel gazed through the expansive glass walls of his penthouse office. Once a towering figure in the tech industry, his company, Lumina Corp, was celebrated as a beacon of innovation. His wife, Clara, was the centerpiece of his life, a radiant force that seemed to complete the picture of his success. Together, they embodied the kind of life people envied but seldom achieved. The evening air carried the hum of distant traffic and the subdued murmur of colleagues preparing to leave for the day. Daniel's assistant handed him a report on an upcoming acquisition. It was just another milestone, another step in the ever-climbing ladder he'd mastered. Yet, a creeping emptiness gnawed at him. Somewhere in the perfection of his life, cracks had begun to form. The drive home was uneventful, the quiet hum of the car contrasting with the storm brewing inside Daniel's mind. Clara was already home, her laughter spilling through the door as he entered. The sound wasn't for him. It was a phone call to someone else. She waved absent-mindedly, her focus elsewhere, and Daniel felt an inexplicable distance settle between them. He shrugged it off, choosing to believe it was exhaustion clouding his perception. Dinner was a carefully curated affair, as always. Clara had an eye for detail and a penchant for excellence, a combination that had made her a formidable partner in Daniel's world. But tonight, the warmth was missing. Her eyes flitted away from his gaze, her responses mechanical. He asked about her day, hoping to bridge the gap he felt widening, but her answers were curt. She excused herself before dessert, claiming a headache. The ache in his chest deepened as he sat alone at the table, staring at the flickering candlelight. Clara's departure from the room felt more significant than he was ready to admit. He poured himself a drink, nursing it as he stood by the window, the city's glow painting a story he could no longer recognize as his own. The accident came the next day, swift and merciless. On his way to a crucial meeting, a sudden swerve on the wet highway left his car spinning out of control. The cacophony of shattering glass and twisting metal echoed in his ears as his world turned upside down. When he awoke in the hospital days later, his body was broken, and his life, as he knew it, irrevocably altered. Daniel's world became a series of sterile walls and the monotony of medical routines. Clara visited him dutifully at first, her expressions a blend of pity and detachment. He watched her struggle to hide her discomfort, her impatience thinly veiled. Each visit grew shorter, her excuses piling higher. As the weeks turned to months, she became a rare presence, her calls brief and devoid of emotion. One afternoon, Daniel overheard Clara's conversation with her mother in the corridor outside his room. Her words were sharp, a dagger slicing through the tenuous hope he had clung to. "I can't do this anymore. I didn't sign up to play nursemaid." The pain of her betrayal struck harder than his injuries ever could. When Clara left for good, Daniel didn't cry. The tears had long dried up, leaving behind an emptiness that consumed him. His parents arranged for Amanda, a caregiver whose gentle presence initially irritated him. He didn't want kindness or sympathy. He wanted his life back. Yet, Amanda persisted with a patience that chipped away at his walls, her quiet strength becoming a balm for his wounded spirit. By the time the first year of his confinement ended, Daniel's bitterness had begun to wane. The man who once ruled boardrooms now wrestled with the simplest of tasks, each small victory a hard-fought triumph. Amanda's unwavering encouragement and his parents' quiet resilience rekindled something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. For the first time in months, Daniel allowed himself to imagine a future beyond his wheelchair. It was an unfamiliar terrain, fraught with challenges, but the spark of determination ignited once more. As he looked out his window at the city below, he realized his journey of rebuilding had only just begun. The room was still, bathed in the soft glow of early morning sunlight filtering through the curtains. Daniel sat in his chair, his fingers trembling as he tried to grip the rim of his coffee mug. The effort seemed monumental, each second a reminder of the limits his body now imposed. Amanda stood a few feet away, her eyes tracking his movements, offering encouragement without words. It wasn't her voice that brought solace, but her presence. She had a way of stepping into the silence without breaking it, filling the room with an unspoken reassurance. Daniel finally managed to lift the mug to his lips, the bitter taste of coffee mingling with the quiet satisfaction of accomplishment. A nod from Amanda was his only reward, but it felt like enough. Clara's absence lingered like a ghost in the house. Her perfume still clung to the air in certain corners, a haunting reminder of her once dominant presence. Daniel avoided the master bedroom where they had shared so many intimate moments. Instead, he confined himself to the study and the smaller guest room, as though shrinking his world could lessen the weight of his loss. Amanda moved about the house, unobtrusive yet efficient. She had begun rearranging small things to better accommodate his new reality. A handrail here, a widened pathway there. Daniel resented the changes at first, viewing them as a concession to his condition. But over time, he came to appreciate her thoughtfulness, even if he never admitted it aloud. The first real conversation between them happened on a rare rainy evening. The sound of raindrops hitting the roof set a rhythm to the otherwise quiet house. Amanda had brought him a book, a collection of essays she claimed had helped her through difficult times. Daniel accepted it reluctantly, flipping through the pages without much interest. "You don't have to read it," Amanda said, her voice steady yet warm. "I just thought you might find something in there. A phrase, a story, anything." Daniel looked up, meeting her gaze for the first time without the shield of sarcasm or indifference. "Why do you care?" he asked, his voice brittle with mistrust. Her smile was small but genuine. "Because everyone needs someone to care. And right now, you need it more than most." The simplicity of her answer disarmed him. He turned back to the book, unsure of what else to say. That night, he read the first essay. By the end of it, something in him had shifted, an imperceptible, yet profound, crack in the armor he had built around his heart. Amanda's influence was subtle but pervasive. She never pushed, never demanded. Instead, she waited, allowing Daniel to take each step in his own time. Their routine began to feel less like a chore and more like a rhythm, a quiet dance of rebuilding. One morning, as Amanda adjusted the straps on his therapy equipment, Daniel found himself asking about her life. She hesitated at first, then shared fragments of her story. She had grown up in a small town, raised by a single mother who worked tirelessly to give her a better life. Amanda had dreamed of becoming a nurse but couldn't afford the schooling, so she found work as a caregiver instead. "It's not what I planned," she admitted, her tone tinged with both pride and regret. "But it's honest work, and it's brought me here." Daniel nodded, absorbing her words. For the first time, he saw Amanda not just as a caregiver, but as a person with her own struggles and dreams. The realization was humbling, and a seed of gratitude took root within him. The breakthrough in Daniel's physical therapy came unexpectedly. After weeks of frustration, he managed to move his leg slightly during a session. The motion was small, barely perceptible, but it sent a jolt of hope through him. Amanda's cheer was infectious, her clapping hands breaking the sterile silence of the therapy room. "You did it!" she exclaimed, her eyes shining with pride. For the first time in months, Daniel smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that lit up his face. In that moment, he realized he was no longer fighting this battle alone. Amanda was in his corner, and for the first time since the accident, he felt like he had a chance to win. As the day ended, Daniel sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle against the night sky. The pain of Clara's betrayal and abandonment hadn't disappeared, but it had begun to fade, replaced by something stronger: determination. He wasn't sure where this path would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't let the past define him any longer. The morning air was crisp, carrying with it the scent of dew and a faint promise of warmth. Daniel wheeled himself onto the patio for the first time since the accident. The act of simply being outside felt monumental, a small rebellion against the prison his house had become. Amanda followed, a quiet presence beside him, ready if he needed her but content to let him explore the moment alone. The city spread out before him, vibrant and alive. He had once been a part of that rhythm, a titan of innovation. Now, he felt like a spectator, watching the world move on without him. Yet, the view wasn't as painful as he had expected. It was different, quieter, but somehow just as valuable. Amanda broke the silence, her voice light and conversational. "It's a good day to start something new." Daniel glanced at her, eyebrows raised. "Like what? Learning to garden from a wheelchair?" She laughed, a sound that was warm and genuine. "Why not? Stranger things have happened." He chuckled despite himself. The humor was small, almost inconsequential, but it carried a weight that neither of them acknowledged aloud. It was the first time in months Daniel had felt the stirrings of his old self, a man who could laugh, even at his own expense. As the days passed, Amanda encouraged him to engage more with the world outside. She brought him newspapers, engaging him in debates about current events. When his interest waned, she introduced puzzles and games, gently nudging him to exercise his mind even as his body struggled to catch up. Slowly but surely, Daniel's days grew fuller, his mind less consumed by the past. One afternoon, during a particularly sunny spell, Amanda pushed Daniel to try something new, painting. She set up a small easel and paints in the study, laying out the tools with care. Daniel stared at the setup with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "I'm not an artist," he said flatly. "You don't have to be," Amanda replied, handing him a brush. "It's not about creating a masterpiece. It's about expressing yourself." He hesitated, but eventually dipped the brush into the paint. The first stroke was hesitant, awkward. The second felt more natural. Soon, he was absorbed in the act, the colors blending and swirling on the canvas in a chaotic dance. By the time he finished, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the room was bathed in twilight. Amanda surveyed his work with a thoughtful expression. "It's beautiful," Daniel snorted. "It's a mess." "Maybe, but it's your mess. And that's what makes it special." Her words stayed with him long after she left the room. He stared at the painting, seeing not just the chaos but the effort it represented. It was imperfect, but it was a start. The following weeks brought new challenges. Daniel's physical therapy intensified, pushing him beyond his comfort zone. There were days when the pain was overwhelming, and he wanted nothing more than to quit. But Amanda was always there, her encouragement unwavering. She didn't let him wallow in self-pity, but she also knew when to offer a kind word or a gentle touch. Their bond deepened with each passing day. Amanda became more than just a caregiver. She was a confidant, a steady presence in the storm of his recovery. For the first time, Daniel found himself sharing pieces of his life with her. Stories of his childhood, the rise of his company, and even his marriage to Clara. He spoke of the good times and the bad, his voice heavy with the weight of memories. Amanda listened without judgment, her eyes filled with empathy. She didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. Instead, she simply listened, giving Daniel the space to unburden himself. It was a gift he hadn't realized he needed. One evening, as they sat on the patio, Amanda shared a story of her own. She spoke of her mother's struggles, the sacrifices she had made to give Amanda a better life. There was pain in her voice, but also pride. Daniel listened intently, moved by her resilience. "You're stronger than you look," he said, his tone half teasing. Amanda smiled, her gaze steady. "So are you." The words lingered in the air between them, unspoken truths weaving a bond that neither dared to name. As the night deepened, Daniel felt a quiet sense of gratitude. He was still far from where he wanted to be, but for the first time in a long while, he believed he might get there. When he finally went to bed, his mind was restless, filled with plans and possibilities. The darkness that had once consumed him no longer felt so suffocating. Instead, it was a canvas, waiting to be painted with the colors of his new life. The morning began with a soft knock on Daniel's door, Amanda's familiar signal. He had grown used to her punctuality, her quiet rhythm of care that shaped his days. She entered with a small, hopeful smile, holding a tray with breakfast and a folded newspaper. The aroma of fresh coffee wafted through the room, a subtle reminder that even the simplest pleasures could ground him. Daniel had grown stronger over the weeks, his hands regaining some of their dexterity. He poured the coffee himself, savoring the act as much as the drink. Amanda sat nearby, scribbling something in a worn notebook she carried everywhere. Curiosity got the better of him. "What are you always writing?" he asked, gesturing toward the notebook. Amanda hesitated, her pen pausing mid-stroke. "Just thoughts. Stories, ideas. Sometimes plans." "Plans?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. She shrugged, her expression shy. "Dreams, really. Things I'd like to do one day." Daniel studied her for a moment. "Like what?" Amanda seemed to weigh her response carefully. "I've always wanted to open a community clinic. A place where people can come for help, even if they can't afford it. It's unrealistic, I know, but it's something I think about." There was a vulnerability in her voice that Daniel hadn't heard before. It struck him how little he truly knew about her, despite the countless hours they had spent together. For the first time, he felt a desire to give something back, to offer her the kind of support she had so freely given him. "That doesn't sound unrealistic," he said finally. "It sounds noble." Amanda's smile was small but genuine. "Maybe, but it's a long way off." The conversation lingered in Daniel's mind throughout the day. He found himself replaying her words, imagining the kind of clinic she described. It was a stark contrast to the corporate world he had dominated for so long, yet something about it resonated with him. For the first time since the accident, he wondered if his expertise and resources could be used for something other than profit. Therapy that afternoon was grueling. His therapist introduced a new exercise, one that required him to use his upper body strength to maneuver himself onto a lower platform. The first attempt ended in failure, his arms giving out halfway. Amanda was there, steady as ever, her voice calm and encouraging. "You'll get it," she said simply, as though failure wasn't an option. Daniel tried again, gritting his teeth against the strain. His muscles screamed in protest, but he pushed through, finally making it onto the platform. The victory was small, yet monumental, a tangible sign of his progress. Amanda clapped, her enthusiasm infectious. "I knew you could do it." Her confidence in him was a lifeline, pulling him through the darkest moments. He couldn't explain why, but her belief in his abilities made him believe in them too. That evening, as he sat by the window, he thought about how far he had come, and how much of that was due to Amanda. The next day brought an unexpected visit. Daniel's parents arrived, their faces a mix of concern and cautious optimism. It was the first time they had seen him since Clara's departure, and the tension in the room was palpable. His mother fussed over him, rearranging pillows and asking endless questions about his progress. His father, ever the stoic, offered quiet encouragement. Amanda stayed in the background, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the familial chaos. She seemed to understand the delicate balance of the moment, stepping in only when needed. By the time his parents left, Daniel felt emotionally drained but oddly uplifted. Their visit had reminded him of the support system he still had, even if it wasn't the one he had expected. That evening, Daniel wheeled himself into the study, his thoughts restless. Amanda's notebook sat on the desk, forgotten in the flurry of activity. He hesitated, torn between respecting her privacy and satisfying his curiosity. Finally, he opened it, flipping through pages filled with neat handwriting. The entries were a mix of personal reflections and plans for the future. One page caught his eye, a detailed sketch of the community clinic she had mentioned. It was more than just a dream. It was a vision, complete with notes on funding, potential locations, and outreach programs. The depth of her planning astonished him. When Amanda entered the room, he quickly closed the notebook, guilt flashing across his face. She noticed but didn't comment, her expression unreadable. Instead, she picked up the notebook and tucked it into her bag. "Thank you for today," she said softly, "for letting your parents in. It meant a lot to them." Daniel nodded, his mind still on the notebook. "Amanda," he began hesitantly, "about your clinic. Have you ever thought about making it real?" She paused, surprised by the question. "Every day. But dreams like that need more than just good intentions." "Maybe I can help," he said, the words coming out before he had fully processed them. Amanda looked at him, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. "You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted. "You've done so much for me. Let me do this for you." Her expression softened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. For a moment, Neither of them spoke, the weight of the offer hanging in the air. Finally, Amanda nodded, a small but hopeful smile breaking through. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As she left the room, Daniel felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in months. The clinic wasn't just Amanda's dream anymore. It had become his too. Together, they would build something new, something meaningful. And in the process, perhaps he would rebuild himself as well. The following weeks were a whirlwind of planning. Amanda hesitated at first, unsure how serious Daniel was about helping with the clinic. But his determination silenced her doubts. Every morning, they pored over her notes, refining the ideas she had sketched out in the margins of her notebook. Her vision, once a private dream, began to take shape under Daniel's meticulous planning. They spent hours debating the details, what kind of services the clinic would offer, how to fund it, and where it would be located. Amanda's passion for the project was infectious, and Daniel found himself energized in a way he hadn't felt since before the accident. For the first time in months, he wasn't just existing, he was creating. Despite the progress, not every day was easy. Daniel's physical therapy grew more intense as his strength returned. The exercises often left him drained and frustrated, but Amanda's encouragement kept him moving forward. One morning, after a particularly grueling session, he threw the therapy bands aside in anger. "I'm never going to walk again," he muttered, his voice laced with bitterness. Amanda knelt beside him, her expression firm but compassionate. "You don't know that," she said quietly. "And even if you don't, that doesn't define you. What you're doing now, building something that will help so many people, that's what matters." Her words struck a chord, cutting through his self-pity. He took a deep breath, nodding slowly. "You're right," he admitted. I hate feeling weak." "You're not weak, Daniel," Amanda said. "You're one of the strongest people I know." The sincerity in her voice brought a lump to his throat. He didn't respond, but her words stayed with him, fueling his determination to keep going. As the clinic plans progressed, they began to involve other people. Amanda contacted a few old colleagues from her caregiving days, asking for advice on staffing and operations. Daniel reached out to his network of business contacts, securing potential investors who shared their vision. Each call was a small victory, a step closer to making the clinic a reality. One afternoon, they visited a property that Amanda had identified as a potential site for the clinic. The building was old and in need of repairs, but it had charm, a sprawling brick structure with large windows that let in plenty of light. Daniel could see the potential immediately. "This is it," Amanda said, her eyes shining with excitement. "I can feel it." Daniel smiled, her enthusiasm contagious. "Then let's make it happen." They spent hours exploring the space, discussing renovations and possibilities. Amanda's excitement grew with every idea they brainstormed, while Daniel took mental notes on the practicalities, permits, contractors, and budgets. For the first time, the clinic felt like more than just a dream. It was becoming tangible. That evening, as they sat on the patio, Amanda looked at Daniel with a mix of gratitude and wonder. "I don't know how to thank you for this," she said softly. "You don't have to," Daniel replied. "This isn't just for you. It's for me too. For the first time in months, I feel like I have a purpose again. So, thank you." Amanda reached out, her hand brushing his briefly before pulling back. The gesture was small, but it carried a depth of emotion that neither of them dared to voice. Their bond, forged through shared struggles and dreams, had grown stronger than either of them had expected. The next challenge came in the form of funding. While Daniel's contacts were willing to invest, they wanted proof of concept, a detailed plan that outlined how the clinic would operate and serve the community. Amanda and Daniel worked late into the nights, crafting a proposal that combined her passion with his business acumen. The process wasn't without its conflicts. They clashed over details, Amanda pushing for more community-focused programs, while Daniel insisted on practicality and cost-effectiveness. But their arguments always ended in compromise, each of them respecting the other's perspective. By the time the proposal was complete, they both felt a mix of exhaustion and pride. Amanda read through the final draft, her eyes misting as she reached the end. "It's perfect," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Daniel grinned. It's a start. They submitted the proposal to potential investors, then waited anxiously for responses. The days that followed were tense, but Amanda refused to let doubt take hold. She kept busy with preparations, while Daniel focused on his therapy, pushing himself harder than ever. Each small victory in his recovery felt like a step toward the clinic's success. When the first investor called with their approval, Amanda practically tackled Daniel in excitement. "They said yes," she exclaimed, her laughter ringing through the room. Daniel couldn't help but laugh with her, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. For the first time since the accident, he felt a spark of the man he used to be, driven, ambitious, and full of possibility. That night, as they celebrated with a simple dinner on the patio, Daniel realized how much Amanda had changed his life. She hadn't just helped him recover physically. She had reignited a fire within him, a belief that he could still achieve greatness even in a different form. As the stars blinked into view above them, Daniel felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The clinic was still a work in progress, but it had already given him something he thought he had lost forever: hope. The buzz of activity around the clinic project grew louder as more investors signed on. Daniel and Amanda were now working with a small team of advisors and architects to finalize the design and operations. The once dilapidated building they had chosen was slowly being transformed into a beacon of hope, its worn bricks giving way to fresh paint, new windows, and modern interiors. Amanda's excitement was contagious. She spent her days coordinating with contractors, poring over blueprints, and interviewing potential staff. Daniel, though physically limited, immersed himself in the financial and operational aspects. He had always been a strategist, and even from a wheelchair, his sharp mind and experience made him a formidable force. But as the clinic's foundation took shape, so did new challenges. The strain of balancing his rehabilitation with the demands of the project began to weigh heavily on Daniel. Late one evening, as Amanda reviewed contracts in the study, she noticed Daniel struggling with a therapy device. His frustration was palpable, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. "Daniel," she said softly, setting the papers aside, "take a break." He shook his head, his jaw tight. "I don't have time for breaks. I need to get stronger. Faster." Amanda crossed the room, kneeling beside him. "You're already making incredible progress. Don't push yourself to the point of burnout," Daniel sighed, leaning back in his chair. I hate feeling like this. Like I'm not pulling my weight." "You're doing more than enough," Amanda assured him, her voice steady. "And this isn't just about you anymore. You've already given so much to this project. Let the rest of us carry some of the load." Her words were a gentle reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. For a moment, the weight of his own expectations lifted, replaced by the warmth of her unwavering support. The next morning, they received a call from one of the investors, a prominent philanthropist who wanted to visit the site and discuss the project in person. Amanda was thrilled, but Daniel hesitated. He hadn't been to the construction site since renovations began, and the thought of appearing vulnerable in front of a potential benefactor filled him with anxiety. Amanda seemed to sense his unease. "You don't have to go if you're not ready," she said gently. "No," Daniel replied after a moment's pause. "I need to do this. It's important." The visit was scheduled for the following afternoon. Amanda helped Daniel prepare, ensuring he felt comfortable and confident. When they arrived at the site, the philanthropist, a tall, silver-haired man named Victor, greeted them warmly. He seemed genuinely interested in the project, asking thoughtful questions and praising their vision. As they toured the building, Daniel found himself easing into the conversation. Victor didn't seem to notice or care about Daniel's physical condition. Instead, he focused on the clinic's potential impact, his enthusiasm matching Amanda's. By the end of the visit, he had pledged additional funding, citing the passion and determination he saw in both of them. "That went well," Amanda said as they returned home, her smile radiant. Daniel nodded, a flicker of pride in his expression. "Better than I expected." The success of the visit reignited Daniel's confidence. He threw himself back into his therapy with renewed vigor, determined to continue his progress. Amanda, meanwhile, pushed forward with hiring staff and finalizing program details. Together, they were building something extraordinary, and the anticipation of its completion fueled their efforts. But the universe had other plans. One evening, as Amanda reviewed the clinic's projected expenses, she noticed a significant discrepancy in the budget. The numbers didn't add up, and further investigation revealed a mistake in the contractor's billing. It wasn't intentional, but it threatened to derail their timeline. Amanda brought the issue to Daniel, her worry evident. "If we don't resolve this quickly, we'll lose weeks of progress." Daniel studied the numbers, his mind racing. "We'll fix it. I'll call the contractor first thing in the morning. And if they can't adjust, we'll find someone who can." True to his word, Daniel spent the next day navigating tense negotiations with the contractor. His years of business experience proved invaluable, and by evening, the issue was resolved. The delay would be minimal, and the budget remained intact. "You saved us," Amanda said as she brought him a celebratory cup of tea that night. "Just doing my part," Daniel replied with a small smile. But as the excitement of the day faded, a new thought took root in Daniel's mind. Despite the challenges, he realized he was no longer consumed by bitterness or self-pity. The clinic had given him a purpose beyond himself, and Amanda had shown him a kind of partnership he had never experienced before. It wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. That night, as he lay in bed, Daniel allowed himself to think about the future. Not the distant, abstract one he had once dreamed of with Clara, but a tangible, meaningful one. For the first time in months, it felt within reach. And at the heart of it all was Amanda, her quiet strength and unwavering belief in him serving as both a foundation and a guiding light. The crisp morning air carried the distant hum of traffic as Daniel and Amanda stood outside the clinic. Construction was nearly complete, and the building gleamed with a fresh coat of paint, its once derelict appearance now replaced by a hopeful, inviting facade. Workers bustled around them, installing the final touches, while Amanda reviewed a checklist, her pen darting across the page. "This is really happening," Amanda said, her voice tinged with awe. Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed on the building. "It is. And it's because of you." She glanced at him, surprised. "It's because of us." He smiled, but his mind was elsewhere, tracing the path that had led them here. The clinic was more than just a building. It was a symbol of his recovery, a testament to the transformation that had begun the day Amanda walked into his life. The opening day loomed, and the pressure mounted. Amanda worked tirelessly to finalize the staff and programs, while Daniel focused on logistics and community outreach. They were a seamless team, their strengths complementing each other in a way that felt natural, even inevitable. Yet, beneath the surface of their shared purpose, Daniel sensed a shift in his feelings for Amanda. What had begun as gratitude and respect had deepened into something more profound. He found himself looking forward to her presence, her laughter, and the way she lit up when discussing her dreams. But he hesitated to act on these feelings, unsure if they were reciprocated, or if he was ready for another relationship after Clara. One evening, after a long day of meetings and preparations, Daniel and Amanda sat on the patio, sharing a rare moment of quiet. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers from the garden Amanda had insisted on planting. "Do you ever think about what's next?" Daniel asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Amanda tilted her head, curious. "Next for what?" "For you. After the clinic opens." She hesitated, her expression thoughtful. "I suppose I'll just keep doing what I've been doing, helping people. This clinic is my dream, but it's also just the beginning. There's so much more I want to do." Daniel nodded, her words stirring something in him. "You're amazing, you know that?" Amanda laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm just me." "No," Daniel said, his voice firm. "You're more than that. You've given me a reason to believe in myself again. And I'm not sure I've ever told you how much that means to me." Her gaze softened, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush. "You don't have to say anything. I can see it in the way you've changed." The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken emotions. But before either of them could say more, Amanda's phone buzzed with a reminder about the next day's schedule, breaking the spell. As the opening day approached, tensions ran high. A last-minute delay with the medical equipment threatened to derail their timeline, and Daniel found himself locked in yet another round of negotiations. His patience wore thin, But Amanda's calm presence steadied him, her optimism a balm for his frayed nerves. When the equipment finally arrived, just days before the grand opening, Daniel felt an overwhelming sense of relief. They spent the next 48 hours overseeing the final setup, their exhaustion tempered by excitement. The night before the opening, Amanda found Daniel in the study, staring at the clinic's logo, a simple yet powerful design symbolizing hope and renewal. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch light but grounding. "You've done something incredible, Daniel," she said. "Tomorrow, you're going to see just how many lives this place will change." He looked up at her, his expression a mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. "I couldn't have done it without you." Amanda smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We did this together." The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that seemed to carry its own promise. Guests began to arrive early, a mix of community members, local officials, and reporters eager to cover the story. Daniel, dressed in a tailored suit, wheeled himself to the entrance, his heart pounding with anticipation. Amanda stood beside him, her excitement palpable. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, her professional demeanor laced with a genuine joy that drew people to her. Together, they greeted guests, their teamwork seamless as always. When the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, Daniel was handed the microphone. He hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. But as he looked out at the crowd, he saw Amanda, her eyes filled with pride and encouragement. With a deep breath, he began to speak. He shared the story of the clinic's creation, its mission to serve the community, and the team that had made it all possible. But most importantly, he spoke of hope, how it had carried him through his darkest days and brought him to this moment. The crowd erupted in applause as Daniel cut the ribbon, officially opening the clinic. He looked at Amanda, her smile radiant, and for a brief moment, everything else faded away. The doubts, the pain, the fear. They were replaced by a sense of fulfillment and connection he hadn't felt in years. As the day unfolded, Daniel found himself surrounded by well-wishers, their gratitude and excitement a testament to the clinic's impact. But his thoughts kept drifting back to Amanda, to the way she had believed in him when no one else had. He realized then that the clinic wasn't just a new beginning for the community. It was a new beginning for him as well. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was the start of something even more profound between him and Amanda. The days following the clinic's opening were a whirlwind of activity. Patients poured in, and the halls were filled with the sounds of conversations, laughter, and hope. For Amanda, it was the realization of a lifelong dream. She threw herself into her work with tireless energy, ensuring every detail was perfect, every patient cared for. For Daniel, the clinic became a second home, a place where he felt purpose and belonging. But with the clinic's success came challenges. The influx of patients overwhelmed the staff at times, and Amanda often worked late into the night, balancing administrative duties with her hands-on approach. Daniel watched her push herself to the brink, her determination unwavering but her exhaustion evident. "You need to take a break," he told her one evening as they sat in the small office they now shared at the clinic. Amanda smiled wearily, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'll rest when things settle down." "They won't settle down unless you let others help," Daniel insisted. "You don't have to do this alone." Her expression softened. "I'm not alone. I have you." The words struck Daniel harder than he expected. They carried a weight, a trust that Amanda rarely voiced but always showed in her actions. He nodded, resolving to find ways to ease her burden. The first opportunity came unexpectedly. One of Daniel's former colleagues from the tech industry visited the clinic, intrigued by the project after seeing news coverage of the opening. They discussed integrating innovative technology to streamline operations and improve patient care. Daniel saw the potential immediately and worked with his colleague to implement the changes. When Amanda saw the results, a more efficient system that reduced staff workload and improved patient scheduling, she was visibly moved. "You're a miracle worker," she said, half joking. Daniel shrugged. "Just using what I know." But as the days turned into weeks, the intensity of their shared work began to reveal unspoken feelings. They spent hours together, their conversations seamlessly blending professional discussions with personal anecdotes. Daniel found himself looking forward to those moments, his heart lightening whenever Amanda laughed or smiled. One evening, after an especially long day, they decided to celebrate the clinic's first month in operation with a quiet dinner at Daniel's house. Amanda had insisted on cooking, refusing his offer to order takeout. "You've been working too hard," she said, tying an apron around her waist. "Let me take care of this." Daniel watched her move around the kitchen, her ease and confidence a stark contrast to the whirlwind pace of their days at the clinic. The aroma of garlic and spices filled the air, and for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt completely at peace. Over dinner, their conversation turned reflective. Amanda spoke about her childhood, the struggles she and her mother had faced, and the moments that had shaped her passion for helping others. Daniel listened intently, his respect for her deepening with every word. "You're incredible," he said quietly, his gaze steady. "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you." Amanda blushed, her fork pausing midair. "I could say the same about you." Their eyes met, the moment charged with unspoken emotions. But before either of them could say more, Amanda's phone buzzed with a notification, breaking the spell. "I should probably get going," she said, glancing at the time. Daniel nodded, his heart sinking slightly. "Of course. Long day tomorrow." As Amanda gathered her things, Daniel found himself wrestling with his feelings. He had spent so long guarding his heart, convinced that love was a risk he couldn't afford. But Amanda had changed that. She had shown him what it meant to trust, to build something together, and to find joy in the smallest moments. The following weeks only intensified his feelings. Every glance, every touch, every shared laugh brought them closer. Amanda, too, seemed to linger in their moments together, her smiles softer, her words more intimate. Yet, both of them hesitated, uncertain of how to navigate the unspoken bond that had grown between them. The turning point came one evening after a particularly challenging day at the clinic. A patient's family had expressed their gratitude to Amanda in a way that left her deeply moved but emotionally drained. She found Daniel in the office, staring at a painting he had created during his recovery, a swirling mix of colors that seemed to capture his journey. "I don't know how you did it," Amanda said, her voice quiet. "Built yourself back up after everything you went through." Daniel turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "I didn't do it alone. You were there. You still are." She met his gaze, her eyes glistening. "You've given me just as much, Daniel. More than I ever expected." The air between them seemed to crackle with tension. Daniel reached for her hand, his touch tentative but deliberate. "Amanda, I don't know where this goes, but I know I don't want to lose what we have." She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Neither do I." In that moment, the weight of their unspoken feelings lifted. They didn't need grand declarations or promises. What they had built, both at the clinic and in their hearts, was enough. For now, it was enough. As the night deepened, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of wholeness, not defined by his circumstances, but by the people who had stood by him. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that happiness wasn't just possible. It was already within reach. The days following their quiet confession passed with an unspoken understanding between Daniel and Amanda. Their relationship hadn't shifted drastically. They still worked tirelessly together at the clinic, exchanged banter during late-night planning sessions, and shared quiet moments in the evenings. Yet, beneath the surface, everything felt different. There was a new depth to their connection, a warmth that seemed to infuse every interaction. The clinic continued to thrive, becoming a cornerstone of the community. Stories of lives changed began to spread. Families reunited, chronic conditions managed, and individuals finding hope in a place designed to heal not just bodies but spirits. Daniel and Amanda often found themselves at the center of it all, the driving forces behind the clinic's success. But the weight of their responsibilities didn't lessen. One evening, as they closed the clinic for the day, Amanda leaned against the reception desk, exhaustion etched into her features. "You should go home and rest," Daniel said, rolling closer to her. Amanda shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "I could say the same to you." "I'm serious," Daniel insisted. "You've been pushing yourself too hard." I'll rest when you do, she replied, her tone light but her gaze steady. Daniel chuckled, the sound low and genuine. Stubborn as ever. And you wouldn't have it any other way, she teased. Their laughter filled the quiet space, a moment of levity amidst the constant demands of their work. Yet, even as they found joy in their shared moments, challenges loomed on the horizon. A few weeks later, Clara's name resurfaced in Daniel's life. It began with an unexpected email, polite but distant, asking to meet. Daniel stared at the message for a long time, memories of their past swirling in his mind. The betrayal, the abandonment, the pain. It all came rushing back, but he didn't feel the same bitterness he once had. Instead, there was a strange sense of detachment, as though those memories belonged to someone else. When he finally told Amanda about the email, she listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. "Are you going to see her?" she asked gently. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "I think I need to." For closure, Amanda reached out, placing a hand on his. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." The meeting with Clara took place in a quiet cafe downtown. She arrived looking as polished as ever, her appearance carefully curated. But there was a tension in her movements, a hesitance that Daniel hadn't seen before. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Clara began, her voice soft. "I wasn't sure you'd respond." Daniel studied her for a moment, searching for the anger he once felt. It wasn't there. "What do you want, Clara?" She winced at his directness, but quickly composed herself. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. I know I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know I regret it." Her words were sincere, but Daniel felt no relief in hearing them. Instead, he found himself wondering why he had sought this meeting in the first place. He realized then that he didn't need Clara's apology to move on. He had already done that on his own. "I appreciate you saying that," Daniel said, his tone measured. "But I've built a new life now. One that doesn't include you." Clara nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I understand. I hope you're happy." "I am," he replied simply. The conversation ended without fanfare. As Daniel left the cafe, he felt lighter, as though he had shed a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. The past was behind him, and for the first time, he felt no need to look back. When he returned home, Amanda was waiting for him on the patio, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "How did it go?" she asked. "It went," Daniel replied, his lips curving into a small smile. "I think I needed to see her to realize I don't need her anymore." Amanda's shoulders relaxed, and she returned his smile. "I'm glad." As they sat together, the city lights twinkling in the distance, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. Clara's return had tested his resolve, but it had also reaffirmed everything he had found with Amanda. She wasn't just a part of his recovery, she was his future. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet moments of joy. Daniel continued to make progress in his therapy, his strength and mobility improving daily. Amanda, ever the optimist, celebrated every milestone with him, her support unwavering. One evening, as they walked through the clinic's garden, a project Amanda had championed, Daniel stopped, turning to face her. The moonlight bathed her features in a soft glow, and for a moment, he couldn't find the words he wanted to say. "Amanda," he began, his voice steady. "This clinic, this life we've built together. I don't know what I'd do without you." She smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "You'll never have to find out." The simplicity of her words struck him, and before he could think, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, her fingers curling around his. In that moment, the past and all its pain felt like a distant memory. All that mattered was the present, the life they were building, together. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, leaves swirling in shades of amber and crimson as Daniel sat on the patio. He felt a rare sense of contentment as he watched Amanda move through the garden, her hands gently tending to the plants she had nurtured into bloom. This place, this life, they had crafted it together, piece by piece, and now it thrived not just as a physical space but as a testament to their resilience. The clinic had grown far beyond their initial vision. It wasn't just a place for healing. It had become a sanctuary, a community where people found second chances. Local businesses contributed sponsorships, volunteers streamed in to lend their time, and patients often returned, not just to express gratitude, but to offer help. The sense of purpose that had carried them through the challenges now blossomed into something far more profound. But even in this season of growth, life had its way of testing them. The call came late one evening, jolting Daniel from his quiet reflection. Amanda answered, her face immediately growing tense. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked as she hung up. "There's been a break-in at the clinic," Amanda said, grabbing her coat. The night guard said the intruders damaged the storeroom. Daniel felt a pang of dread. "Let's go." They arrived to find the building eerily silent, the glow of emergency lights illuminating shattered glass and scattered supplies. The police had already begun their investigation, their questions brief but thorough. Amanda walked through the chaos with a calm exterior, but Daniel could see the strain in her eyes. "Why would anyone do this?" she murmured, surveying the damage. "It's not personal," Daniel replied, wheeling himself closer to her. "People see opportunity, not the heart behind what we do." Her expression hardened. "Then we'll rebuild. We've done it before." Her resolve was infectious. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to restore what had been lost. The community rallied around them, donating supplies, money, and time. The setback, while painful, became another opportunity to grow stronger. As the repairs neared completion, Daniel found himself reflecting on everything they had overcome together. The challenges, the moments of doubt, and the victories. They had forged something unbreakable. And amidst the turmoil, his feelings for Amanda had only deepened. One evening, after the last of the repairs were finished, Daniel invited Amanda to dinner at a small bistro they had both admired but never visited. It was quiet and intimate, the kind of place where conversations lingered and time felt suspended. Amanda looked radiant, her face lit with excitement as they discussed the future of the clinic and the possibilities beyond. As the meal drew to a close, Daniel reached for her hand across the table. She looked at him, surprised by the gesture, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Amanda," he began, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "I've spent most of my life building things. Businesses, relationships, my reputation. And for a long time, I thought those things defined me. But then everything fell apart, and you were there. You showed me that life isn't about what you build. It's about who you build it with." Tears glistened in Amanda's eyes, but she didn't interrupt. Daniel took a breath and continued. "You've given me more than I ever thought I could have again. Hope, purpose, and love. I don't want to waste another moment pretending I don't know how I feel. I love you, Amanda, and I want us to face whatever comes next together." Amanda's smile was soft, her eyes shining with emotion. "Daniel, I love you too. I think I've loved you for longer than I've realized." The words filled the space between them, transforming it into something sacred. In that moment, the trials they had endured felt like distant memories, eclipsed by the promise of a shared future. The next few weeks were a blur of joy and planning. Amanda and Daniel didn't announce their relationship to everyone at the clinic immediately, preferring to keep the news close for a time. But their happiness was unmistakable, and those around them noticed the change. The challenges of running the clinic didn't diminish, but with Amanda by his side, Daniel found strength in even the toughest days. Together, they tackled new hurdles, celebrated small victories, and dreamed of the future with a sense of certainty that neither had felt before. On one particularly bright afternoon, as they stood together on the clinic's newly rebuilt patio, Daniel turned to Amanda. "Do you ever think about what it would have been like if we'd met under different circumstances?" Amanda laughed softly. "I used to, but now I think everything happened exactly the way it needed to. We found each other when we needed it most." Daniel nodded, her words resonating deeply. As they watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting the world in hues of gold and orange, Daniel realized that his journey wasn't about finding his old life again. It was about building a new one filled with purpose, love, and the quiet certainty that, no matter what came next, he and Amanda would face it together. Life at the clinic settled into a steady rhythm, one that reflected both the challenges and triumphs of their work. Patients continued to flow through its doors, each bringing a unique story of struggle and hope. Daniel and Amanda had become the heart of the clinic, their partnership inspiring the staff and strengthening the sense of community that surrounded them. But even in this season of growth, the past had a way of reappearing. One afternoon, as Daniel finished reviewing a financial report in his office, Amanda entered with a familiar yet unwelcome expression, concern veiled behind professionalism. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked, his voice steady. She handed him a letter, its contents terse but clear. Clara was suing him, claiming a stake in assets she believed she was entitled to during their separation. The timing was curious, coinciding with a news story about the clinic's success. It was clear that Clara had learned of Daniel's rising prominence once again. Daniel stared at the paper, the weight of old wounds pressing against the fragile peace he had built. "I can't believe this," he muttered, setting the letter down. Amanda sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "What do you want to do?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Fight it. She doesn't deserve another piece of my life." Amanda nodded, her quiet support unwavering. "Then we'll fight it. You're not alone in this." The legal battle began, pulling Daniel into a world he had hoped to leave behind. His lawyers were confident, assuring him that Clara's claims held little merit, but the process still dredged up memories he had tried to bury. Amanda was his constant anchor, her presence a reminder of how far he had come and how much he had to lose. As the weeks passed, Daniel found himself reflecting on the man he had been before the accident, driven, ambitious, but often blind to the deeper meaning in his life. Clara's betrayal had shattered that world, but Amanda had helped him rebuild it into something far greater. One evening, as they sat in the garden after a long day at the clinic, Daniel voiced his thoughts. "You know, for a long time, I thought losing everything was the end of me." Amanda looked at him, her expression gentle. "But it wasn't." "No," he agreed, his gaze steady. "It wasn't. It was the beginning of something I couldn't have imagined. And it's because of you." Amanda reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his. "You've done more than rebuild, Daniel. You've created something beautiful, and I'm proud of you." Her words filled him with a quiet strength, one that carried him through the final stages of the legal battle. When the judge ruled in his favor, dismissing Clara's claims as unfounded, Daniel felt a sense of closure that was far more profound than relief. He had faced his past and emerged stronger, more resolute. The victory was bittersweet, but it marked a turning point. Daniel realized that his journey wasn't just about overcoming adversity. It was about embracing the life he had now. And with Amanda by his side, that life was rich with possibility. In the weeks that followed, the clinic saw a surge in activity. New partnerships were formed, grants were secured, and the staff expanded to meet the growing needs of the community. Daniel and Amanda worked tirelessly, their bond deepening with each shared success. But amidst the bustle, they made time for themselves. Late-night dinners, quiet walks in the garden, and moments of reflection became sacred rituals. Their love was unspoken at first, woven into the fabric of their daily lives, but it soon found its voice. One evening, as they stood on the rooftop terrace of the clinic, watching the city lights twinkle like stars, Daniel turned to Amanda with a seriousness that made her pause. "I used to think I knew what love was," he began, his voice steady. "But I didn't. Not until you." Amanda's eyes glistened, her breath catching in her throat. "Daniel, you showed me what it means to build a life together, to find strength in partnership, and to dream again. I don't want to waste another moment." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. Amanda gasped as he opened it, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice filled with a quiet certainty. Tears spilled down Amanda's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." The city lights blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors as they embraced, their laughter mingling with the hum of the world below. For Daniel, the moment was more than a proposal, it was a promise. A promise to honor the life they had built together, to face every challenge and celebrate every triumph, and to love Amanda with all the depth his heart could offer. As they stood there, their future stretched out before them like an unbroken horizon, Daniel realized that his journey had come full circle. He was no longer the man who had lost everything. He was a man who had found it all. The days leading up to Daniel and Amanda's wedding were filled with a flurry of activity, laughter, and quiet anticipation. They had chosen to keep the ceremony small and intimate, inviting only close friends, family, and a handful of staff from the clinic who had become like extended family. The venue, a serene garden nestled just outside the city, was adorned with soft lights and blooming flowers, a reflection of the love and renewal that had brought them to this moment. On the morning of the wedding, Daniel sat in his study, adjusting his tie in the mirror. His father entered, his face a mixture of pride and emotion. "You look good, son," he said, clasping a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Thanks, Dad," Daniel replied, his voice steady but tinged with nerves. His father hesitated before speaking again. "You've come a long way, Daniel. From where you were to where you are now. I don't think I've ever been prouder." The words struck a chord, and for a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. He simply nodded, a small smile breaking through his composed exterior. As his father left the room, Daniel turned back to the mirror, the weight of the day settling over him, not as a burden, but as a testament to everything he had overcome. Amanda's morning was no less reflective. She stood in front of the mirror in her dressing room, her simple yet elegant gown flowing around her. Her mother fussed over the veil, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted it. "You look beautiful, Amanda," her mother said, tears threatening to spill. Amanda turned to her, taking her mother's hands in her own. "I wouldn't be here without you, Mom. Thank you for everything." Her mother smiled, a mixture of pride and love lighting up her face. "You deserve this happiness, Amanda. Never forget that." As the time for the ceremony approached, guests began to gather in the garden. The air was filled with the scent of flowers and the soft hum of music, a peaceful contrast to the whirlwind of emotions that Daniel and Amanda carried within them. When the ceremony began, Daniel waited at the altar, his hands resting lightly on his wheelchair. As Amanda appeared at the end of the aisle, his breath caught. She was radiant, her smile lighting up the entire space. Each step she took brought her closer, and with every moment, Daniel felt the enormity of his love for her. Amanda's heart raced as she walked toward Daniel, her gaze locked on his. She saw not just the man she had fallen in love with, but the strength and determination that had carried them both through their darkest days. By the time she reached him, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. The officiant began the ceremony, their words weaving a narrative of love, partnership, and resilience. When it came time for their vows, Daniel spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Amanda, you came into my life when I was at my lowest, and you showed me what it means to truly live. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and you've given me more than I ever thought possible. Today, I promise to stand by you, to build a life filled with love, and to face every challenge together. You are my partner, my strength, and my heart." Amanda's tears flowed freely as she began her vows. "Daniel, you've shown me that love is more than words. It's action, perseverance, and faith. You've taught me to dream bigger, to embrace the present, and to trust in the future. I promise to stand by you, to support you, and to love you with everything I have, every day for the rest of our lives." As they exchanged rings, the sunlight broke through the trees, casting a golden glow over the garden. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause was thunderous, a joyous culmination of their journey together. Amanda leaned down, her lips meeting Daniel's in a kiss that was both tender and profound. The reception was a celebration of life and love. Speeches were given, laughter echoed through the garden, and the air was filled with music and dancing. Daniel and Amanda took their first dance as husband and wife, their movements fluid and natural, a testament to the harmony they had found together. As the evening wound down, Daniel and Amanda stole a quiet moment beneath the stars. The garden was bathed in moonlight, and the sounds of the celebration faded into the background. Amanda rested her head on Daniel's shoulder, her fingers entwined with his. "We did it," she said softly. Daniel smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We did, and this is just the beginning." Their journey had been one of trials and triumphs, of loss and renewal. Together, they had built a life filled with purpose and love, one that would carry them through whatever came next. As they sat beneath the stars, Their hearts full, Daniel and Amanda knew that their greatest adventure was only just beginning. Thank you for listening until the end. What did you think of this story? If you can, leave your feedback in the comments. It helps me improve and motivates me to keep sharing stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate the notification bell. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will also touch your heart. A big kiss, and see you in the next story.